I'm just going to say hello.
What is going on, everybody? What is going on, our Irish Whiskey Academy cohort? Today, we have some very special guests. But before we get into that, you're probably wondering, who is this new guy? You've been talking to Maeve and you've been talking to Gustavo, and they've been guiding you through the process so far. I am Joe Nicole. I am the national brand ambassador for the whiskeys over at Middleton. I'm often behind the scenes and fairly busy, but I'm excited to be involved today with you guys. So good morning to my West Coast friends, good afternoon to my East Coast, and good evening to our friends in Ireland. And for those of you that are on YouTube and you're just tuning in because you like to get your learn on, that's okay too. You're probably wondering what's going on here. This is a really cool collaboration with Lush Life Productions, with Portland Cocktail Week, and with the Irish Whiskey Academy, where we take 50 food and beverage professionals and we put them through this really cool experience. Typically, this experience is only offered over there, but we have added this new virtual learning course here to the States. And I'm excited to teach cohort 2, the chapter 3, if you will, of the process over there at the distillery. And so this is going to be the third class of the day, third class of the process. And if you want to catch up because you're confused on where we are, it's okay. You can go back and catch it on YouTube, and you can learn what everybody else has learned so far. And I know you guys have gotten to talk to Carol, and you've learned about the history, and you've gotten to learn about the agriculture and the 2-row spring barley and all the fun things about distillation. But this is where the magic happens. And don't tell Kevin I said that. Because today we have 3 of the best minds in the biz. Joining us is going to be Finbar Curran. He's the wood planning and maturation team lead at Irish Distillers. We have Derek Cronin, first-time caller here. He's a Cooper at Irish Distillers. And we have Tommy Byrne, of course, our Irish Whiskey Academy tutor. He's a legend. He's an international brand ambassador with Irish Distillers. Now, before we let them take it from here and we dive into all the fun things that happen during maturation to give us these delicious flavors, we got to get into the content stuff. You guys know how it is, right? We got to get to the Facebook. We got to get to the YouTube. So like us on Facebook, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and of course, please comment below and ask any questions, because at the end, we will try to get to most of them, and we're going to have a fun Q&A with these guys when we get there. And so also there's going to be, just to tell you now before we get there, so you can get your thinking caps on, the fellows are going to talk for about a half an hour. And then after that, Derek is going to give us an awesome demonstration with those barrels he is standing in between. Now, while Derek is working those barrels, I want you to think of questions that you would like to ask Derek, because after Derek gets done doing his part, we're going to have some personal Q&A with him before we do Q&A with Finbar and Tommy. But that's all I have to say. Let's get to the experts. Finbar, Tommy, I haven't seen you guys in a few months. It's a pleasure to see you. How are we doing over there?
Great seeing you too, Joe. More than delighted to be here. I see the name on the screen there. We have Finbar and Tommy, but it's actually Tommy and Finbar, just to avoid any confusion. But I'm delighted to be here. Sure, Tommy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, delighted. These classes are always great. And if I'm being honest, and Kevin's not here, so if I'm being honest, the wood side of things is kind of my favorite as well. I'm not just saying that because Finbar's here, but yeah, no, looking forward to this class.
I'm sure all the viewers will think the same at the end of it. I always kind of say, maturation is probably 60 to 80% of that taste profile. That's where a lot of those flavor compounds are coming from. So after the class, I'm sure we'll be delighted to hear everyone's feedback to see what they think.
Absolutely. Well, I guess you guys are going to dive right in, right? Let's get into it, and let's get into the science behind, maturation and esterification and all the wonderful things that are happening on your end of the distillery.
Perfect.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so again, guys, look, you know me well. I've been here the last 2 weeks. So again, tutor at the Irish Whiskey Academy, but obviously we've got 2 of the key experts with us today. So Finbar, do you want to?
Yeah, so I'm the maturation team lead with Irish Distillers. Every time people ask me what I actually do, it probably changes every time. I'm very fortunate to have a kind of a very wide and diversified role. I'm able to touch a lot of different, departments within Irish Distillers. For this context, really, I suppose the main thing I would do would be look after the sourcing of all the casks we use for all our different brands. We look after everything from moving them, freight, logistics, looking after the innovation of different cask types in terms of kind of sampling, analysis, do a lot of work with marketing, trying to kind of work on kind of future product for kind of lining up future product releases, do a lot of modeling in terms of how we determine how many barrels we need, how many warehouses we're going to need to build, things like that.
I heard Tommy does a little modeling too, right, Tommy? Yeah.
I haven't got many callbacks lately, Joe, unfortunately.
So it's a wide and diversified role. Love what I do. And I suppose we can get stuck into it.
Yeah, and I think, guys, you've probably seen Derek there. So Derek is the Cooper. You'll be seeing a lot of him later. He has his lovely leather apron on. Unfortunately, we've asked for them. You've got to be a Cooper to get one of those. So we'll see Derek later. So, yeah, just like all the previous classes, we're going to be taking different slides each. So, obviously, I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but what we've covered up to this point is kind of brewing, fermentation, distillation. So all the different grains we use, kind of the various processes, how we basically make a beer or some form of a beer initially. And then last week we talked about it, kind of the two key styles of distillation we do. So producing pot still spirit or grain spirit. The nice thing, I think, from now on is that when it comes to Irish whiskey, the law for maturation is the same no matter what the size. If we're talking like pot still spirit, grain spirit, if you're talking about single malt as well, blended whiskey, the law when it comes to maturation is the same, which I think is nice. So there's a few different, I suppose, aspects to the law, and the one everyone I think seems to focus on, I suppose, is the age. So you can see it on the screen there, hopefully. So it's a minimum 3-year maturation under Irish whiskey law. That speaks for itself. If it's not 3 years old, legally, you can't call it a whiskey. That's actually been part of, I suppose, the Irish whiskey landscape for a very long time, even pre-independence. Going back to like 1915, there was an act when we were part of the United Kingdom. That's when you see this first minimum maturation period. And we talked about that in the first week and the kind of history behind that. So it's been well established here. What I would always say is think of the 3 years as like the minimum standard. That's not a goal we're reaching for. That's the minimum standard, and then we're leaving the whiskies to mature, longer than that. The oldest thing we've ever actually bottled, I suppose, is a 50-year-old, and we would have whiskies. I suppose we'd actually have spirit, stuff that we fill today, and then right the way up. Above 40 years of age, and we'll talk over this class and tomorrow about kind of what happens in the cask, I suppose, and how the whiskey changes. So minimum 3-year maturation, and again, like we've seen in week 1, every big whiskey producing nation has some kind of equivalent law. It's about minimum standards. What we also did touch on in some of the other classes, though, is what's really, really cool about the Irish law is that we're not restricted to oak. So whereas, say like your bourbons and your Tennessee whiskeys in the States, your Scotch whiskey, they have a specific requirement for oak. Irish law is not as specific. It basically says a wooden cask such as oak. So look, oak is, I suppose, the worldwide standard. It's something that we've been using for centuries here. Very comfortable with the kind of flavor profiles we get from oak, that kind of thing. Even within oak, there's a really broad spectrum of flavor, and we'll be talking about that today. So even oak alone can give us huge variation in flavor depending on the subspecies, where it's grown, all that kind of thing. But the opportunities open to us when it comes to maturation are huge because we can experiment outside the realm of oak. So yeah, we'll be talking about this a little bit later on. You might be familiar with some of these. I think chestnut, it's probably the best known of the woods, of the non-oak woods we've worked with. We worked with huge varieties here. Cherry, acacia, other ones not mentioned there like mulberry, maple, hickory, amberana was a fairly recent one. So really, really cool experimentation there. We're pushing the boat out when it comes to wood maturation, and a lot of these have been world first. So obviously it's something, Finbar can be really proud of. We're definitely really proud of here to be pushing the boat out that way. Saying that, 99% of the time it is oak that we're using, and there's a big problem there, I suppose, in that oak isn't really available in the commercial sense in Ireland. So obviously going way back up to about 150 years ago, we would have had Irish oak, and we'll mention that later on. Again, a specific kind of flavor profile you're getting from Irish oak. But unfortunately, those forests weren't being managed. They were being cut down for various industries and weren't being replanted in sufficient quantities. So essentially ran out in kind of the commercial sense. So we would have imported oak from like different parts of Europe in the intervening period. But as we'll see, particularly in the middle of the last century, barrels from America became widely available. And as we'll see, in the current kind of climate, the main source of casks for us, we're importing them all now. The main sources will be ex-bourbon barrels from America, which I'm sure you guys will know a bit about. We'll go into those in a lot of detail. And we're also getting a lot of sherry butts in from Spain. It's nice. They have quite a historical usage in Ireland as well. So we're going to be going deep on those, touch on some of the other types that we're using as well. But that's the main part. It's a minimum 3-year maturation in a wooden cask. Cask can't be any bigger than 700 litres. Talk about that a little bit later on as well. But that kind of sets the scene in what we can do. And jumping ahead then, Finbar is the expert from here, so we'll talk about the journey of the wood.
Excellent. So I suppose we'll probably spend about maybe 15, 20 minutes just going to the next 2 or 3 slides. And really what we just want to do is give you kind of the whole context of how the process works, taking it from forest all the way to finished cask. First step, and I suppose one of the more critical ones, is obviously the landowner. Without the landowner growing oak, we'd be in a spot of bother not being able to get oak for barrels. It's really important as well for that landowner to be actively managing in their own lands, their own forestry lands, for various reasons. But I suppose the more that they are actively managing it, the better quality of oak that they can grow. And there's various different techniques that can be employed to try and grow the best quality oak that they can grow. I suppose the joyous thing about oak, though, is typically in terms of age, you're looking at probably 100 years plus from sapling to when that tree is in a correct state for it to be felled. The other thing I would mention here, I suppose, is I'm probably one of the biggest tree huggers around. There's definitely a lot of pictures of me floating around hugging trees. If you haven't done it yourself, I'd suggest having a go of it. And I suppose realistically, the more kind of sustainable practices that landowners can employ to managing that oak, the better it is for the health of their forest as well, and better for the environment. Normally, when you walk into a forest, I suppose what you're looking for is a long, straight trunk. There's various different techniques you can employ to try and ensure that trunk goes long and straight before crowns, before the branches form at the top of the trunk. There's various techniques like growing hornbeams, which is kind of like another tree variety. And when the oak is competing with the hornbeam, it keeps growing because it wants to get to the top of the forest canopy before crowns. And so you can kind of trick the oak in trying to ensure that it grows long and straight. If there is any branches within the trunk, from kind of low level up, that causes difficulties in terms of the quality that we want to harvest from that log. What you want is, because if there's branches there, it's a weakness within that stave. So you can see the picture there in the middle where the casks are in kind of the gun shape, as we call it, where they're starting to raise the casks. And there's no I suppose imperfections in that wood. If there's an imperfection, that's a weakness. We lose spirit. That's not what we want. So trying to get long, straight stems is really important. A landowner being actively managing helps to do that, but you're talking decades of management. You're talking multi-generational management. I've been fortunate to have many trips with with landowners around the world who some of just do fantastic sustainability work within their forests. It's multi-generational. You know, their fathers bought the farm, and as kids they grew up on the farm. Now they're raising their kids on the farm. It's a really some great stories out there, and that's really what it you know, managing a forest should be. You know, there's those socio-economic factors that are there. And when it's done in a sustainable manner and a very biodiverse manner, it's really rewarding. So typically, a felling crew might look to approach the landowner to buy some oak, or a landowner might look to, you know, as part of the forestry management plan, they might look to you know, get a felling crew on to sell their oak. You know, it's kind of important, I suppose, that it can be done in the right way. There's various different techniques, again, like continuous cover forestry, where you kind of pick isolated parcels within your forest. You'll take oak down, ensuring that there's oak saplings underground ready for regeneration. And what you're doing is you're getting a kind of a diverse age range within your forest over time. And that actually, you know, that draws in different species, different wildlife, different bird life, because you know, some birds like to you know, live in kind of, you know, young forests, some like to live in older forests, and so having that diversification of age makes your forest stronger, and is also very good from a biodiversity perspective. So when the logs are felled, they're put on a truck, sent to a stave mill. Now, stave mills don't like to be called sawmills. They're two separate entities in reality. Sawmill is more for like the likes of paper, where it's kind of plain sawn. A stave mill is set up so we can do what we call quarter sawing. And the reason we quarter saw, I suppose, it's more conducive to ensure that the oak that's used in the staves can be kept more watertight. What I might do is flick on to the next slide here and just show you what I'm talking about. This one here, perfect. So you can see kind of there's a cross section cut right through a log, and you can see various different components. You know, there's kind of inner bark, cambium layer, sapwood, and then everything kind of inside that we refer to as heartwood. So for the use of staves, ideally what we need is heartwood. That's what we're focused on. The drawing, or the cross section in the top right there, you can see that, and if you imagine it, you're quarter sawing that log. So you're breaking it into quarters. I had the pleasure of being in a stave mill in Barrel up the north of Spain, where they're processing our Irish oak. And you have this big mechanism that basically grips the log, and it can orientate the log the way he wants it. So the operator obviously has a keen eye to try and maximize the return he's going to get from those logs. And on his big screen, he has a laser, and all you see then is just a big vertical blade just slicing through like a hot knife through butter, and the log just fall in half. He'll take that half again, and he'll saw it into quarters. So if you imagine that there was, you know, a branch and a knot maybe in one quarter, that quarter might be used differently. So you might not get full staves, which is kind of the vertical pieces on the cask. You might use shorter lengths that might go for heading, that are going on the top and the bottom of the cask. You can also see there the orientation of how those staves are cut. So you can kind of take one cut this way, then you'll take another cut that way. So it's first, second, third cut. And really what you're trying to do is maximize the return that you can get from that log at any given time. Another critical component of American oak, Tom will go into a little more detail on the differences between, say, American oak and European oaks. But one of the components in American oak, and all oaks, I suppose, is a compound called hylosis. So this is what helps the oak stay and remain watertight. So if you look at the sapwood is on the outer perimeter of that trunk. And basically that's the vertical section running up and down from the kind of rooting system. It's taking water, nutrients, and it's bringing that up to the branches and up to the leaves. And And when you look at the annular rings, which I'm sure we've all at some stage been caught in a forest counting the rings to see how old a tree was. And if not, again, I'd recommend it. But you can see the annular rings. So what happens is each growing season where you have your annular growth, what happens is the sapwood is being pushed out as the tree trunk is getting bigger. And this compound called tylosis is filling the vessels or the channels within the sapwood. And that's what seals it and stops and prevents liquid from escaping. So that's why, I suppose, as Tommy mentioned, 99% of what we're using is oak, because it's the composition of that wood that makes it so perfect for making barrels. So that's tylosis. Just quickly mention sustainability. I spent a lot of time over my years, 13 years with Irish Distillers, spent a lot of time working on the sustainability side, and our objective is to, which we've achieved, is ensuring that every barrel that we directly purchase ourselves, so that's kind of outside of any secondary use barrels that we don't directly purchase, but any barrels we purchase directly ourselves, we're bringing them in as 100% PEFC certified. PEFC is the Program of Endorsement for Forestry Certification. There's mutual systems out there. There's Sustainable Forestry Initiative, Forest Stewardship Council, so SFI, FSC. We got PFC certified back in 2015. So working on it for many years, working with our kind of through the supply chain, trying to get sustainably sourced, 100% sustainably sourced casks. What that basically means, just reverting back here, is every entity, the landowner, the stave mill, the cooperage, seasoning bodega, they're all certified within that chain. And it's assuring that the landowner is doing everything ethically, might have, the forestry management plan in place. They're looking after water runoff, they're looking after, the ecology of their lands. The cooperages are ensuring that, certified material doesn't get mixed with uncertified material. Everyone's getting paid fair wages. It ticks a lot of boxes. Those certifications are independently audited and verified. We're very proud of that. We feel like we're one of the leaders in the industry with the work we've done on sustainability.
Yeah, I think that's really neat, Finbar. Just to kind of take it back probably an episode or two, it's really cool how you guys incentivize and work with people who are having these best practices across all the elements, with the agriculture of the farms and also in forestry. I think it's really neat. You guys go the extra mile. It costs more money to do it that way, as we all know, but you guys take all that into account. I just think that's pretty neat what you do there at Middleton with best practices. Yeah,
cheers, Joe. We're really proud of it, to be fair. It's a lot of work, a lot of conversations over the years. We had to get on the ground in various different countries, because every different country you go to is like another jigsaw to be solved in terms of how we get this certification chain of custody in place, but thoroughly enjoyable as well. So we're very proud of it. So the next step, I suppose, stave mills are going to produce the staves. So as you see in the picture there, that's the length of the staves that are the vertical pieces that go into the barrels. When they're cut, I suppose they're high in moisture content. So standing log, you're looking at about 50 to 60% moisture content when it's in the forest. When that's processed, we have to get that moisture content down. So again, you'd break it into two categories. You'd have the American oak, say, in one category. You'd have the European oak in the other category. And I suppose looking at the American oak perspective, what would happen is the staves go into a stave yard. That moisture content will come from about 50, 60% down to about 25% within the first 3 to 6 months, depending on the time of the year, depending on where it's drying. So it rapidly comes down to a point. But after that, it's hard yards to get it further dried. So typically what's done in the US is it's dried. It goes into like a pre-dryer and then a kiln. And that will bring the moisture content down to about 12%, where it's kind of where we want it for bourbon barrels. And that's done over a six-week period typically. On the European side, I suppose typically it's air dried. So there's not really kiln drying that's done on the European side. So whether it's European oak that's used in the distilleries, wineries, if they're using European oak, typically it's going to be air dried. The reason for that, and I suppose that air drying period can be 2 to 3 years. So if you think about the first 6 months getting from 50% to 25%, then from 25% down to about maybe 16 to 14% on the European oak side, that takes another 18 months. So you might do like 0.5% a month. It's pretty slow. The reason, and it's amazing how these things evolve over time, but it's just on the composition side. American oak is higher in kind of lactones, gives the kind of coconut aromas, but not as high on the tannins. Tannins is kind of gives an astringency and bitterness to the spirit. So what's very cleverly done, I suppose, is on the European side, when it's air dried, it's left out in the elements, left out in the sun, left out in the rain. What you'd see over time is, when I visit, say, where our Spanish butts are made on the south of Spain in Jerez, we'd look at the stave yard to see how everything's going there. And you'll see these brown, kind of dark black stains being washed out of the timber. And that's basically tannins coming out. So it's actually a really important step in the whole process to try and take those tannins out of that wood so that you're getting less bitterness and less astringency in your final wine, in your final spirit. And that's kind of, I suppose, Tommy will go into a little bit more and break out in terms of the species there later in the slides. Those, once they're down to the moisture content is at a correct position, a correct set point, the cooperage then can start making the casks. There's various different heating techniques that are applied to that cask to try and give it a final taste that you're going to get from your spirit when it matures in that cask. So there's two kind of processes. There's toasting, which is predominantly done on the European oak side. Generally, it's toasted, not so much charring. On the American oak side, I suppose, because on the technical file with bourbon, it has to be a virgin American oak barrel. It hasn't been used before, hasn't been seasoned before, so it's a virgin barrel. Also has to be charred. And so those bourbon barrels would generally have kind of like a pre-toast done on them and then a char in the finish to ensure it meets that technical definition. I have another slide down, next couple of slides, just to explain what the toasting and charring looks like. I'm a kind of a visual learner, so it's easier to see it when we're chatting through. So we'll come back to that. Once the barrels are made then to what the specification that we require, they're sent, for the bourbons, they're sent for, in the European side, it could be wines, could be any different spirit production facility. And then those casks are filled and they're being seasoned for the first time. So as soon as the liquid goes in, you start the seasoning process, you start the maturation process. What I would say on our side, we go to the nth degree to try and ensure that we keep a consistently seasoned barrel for our quality and for our spirit production. I know this is kind of particular emphasis on black barrel. So for instance, there's a good high sherry component that goes into black barrel. And, for that, we ensure that the Oloroso that is used to season the sherry casks follows that same process, follows the same kind of timelines, and the quality of sherry going into it is very, very consistent. We check it every year. We do analysis, we do sensory on it. And I suppose what we're tasked with, what I'm tasked to give, say, the blending team and the operations team, is a consistently seasoned barrel that we know that when we put our consistently produced component into it, we're going to get the desired result at the end. When all that marries together then for the likes of Black Barrel, we know that every time someone's opening up a bottle of Black Barrel, they're getting the same profile and the same taste that we want them to get and that they want to get. There's a lot of work there, a lot of strategic suppliers we have for decades that we've been using. A very, very tight specification is in place. And ensuring that the quality is always the same is key. If we go out to the market and you can buy, an Oloroso seasoned cask from one supplier and another one from another supplier, you're going to get inconsistencies there. For Irish distillers, that doesn't happen because we have strategic relationships in place and very tight processes in place to manage that quality. Then after the casks are, finished seasoning, could be 2 years, could be 3 years, could be longer. On the bourbon side, those casks are emptied. We'll ensure that, from their emptying point to getting to Midleton, it happens in quick time. We don't want the quality of the cask to spoil in any way, and they're moved as quick as possible. So we always, enjoy getting new casks here. Then, I suppose every cask that comes in, the likes of Derek will be all over them, inspecting them. There's not one cask on site. We have over 2 million casks on site. Now, one of them has not been inspected. Every cask that comes in, a Cooper throws their eye over that.
Just one thing on that, I think I love about that slide is just, we talk about obviously the length the whiskey is in the cask, obviously is a big factor to take into account. I think in the planning of the brands and stuff, you can see there, how much lead time you need before you even have a cask to use, which obviously is a big factor in planning your production. Which is just, it blew my mind the first time I seen it, some of the lead times that we have into some of the planning models.
For sure, yeah. I suppose, some of our planning models, I mean, they look out 40 years. So if you have a 27-year-old redbreast, you're basically forecasting the volumes that you need to sell at that point in time. And you have to be laying down casks now for, say, 27 years, 30 years, 40 years in the future. My cask model kind of concentrate on the next 10 years. But there's an overall planning model, a spirit management tool we use that, takes in those forecasts to ensure, and all our formulations to try and ensure that we have the correct casks in the correct formulations to meet the future requirements of the consumer. So that's great fun.
That's why you were sitting here.
That's why I'm a lot grayer now than when I was a number of years back.
The forecasting is incredible, because not only are you looking at sustainable practices and best practices and aligning yourself with all these companies you align yourself with, you're also thinking of doing that in 20 years. It's not just, do we have the wood in 20 years? Do we have these relationships in 20 years? Do we have the same people, providing us with these casks and with this grain in 20 years? It's pretty wild. I think you guys dive in a little bit more in projections tomorrow, right, with the class. I feel like we learned a little bit more about that last time, but it's really neat. It's a science unto its own.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area, and it's great fun. For some reason, I love spreadsheets and Excel and all that type of stuff. I don't know what that says about me, but there's obviously something wrong with me. Just to mention on the Coopers, so obviously we'll have the one and only our resident Ironman Derek Cronin doing a demonstration for us in a few minutes. But without Coopers, you don't have barrels. I mean, they're a critical element. They're as important as the landowners in the whole process. And it's in this day and age where, we have humanoids making Tesla cars and the likes, I suppose this process is still very, very manual. It is really a craft, and it's fascinating to kind of see Cooper's work. You're potentially they're making barrels, 2 liters, 5 liters, 10 liters, 50 liters, 200 liters, 500 liters, 650 liters. And what's amazing is, I remember asking a Cooper for a measuring tape and just getting looked at, kind of going what's wrong with you? As if because Coopers don't use measuring tapes, which just baffles me. Everything is done just by kind of sight. So it's a serious skill in itself. And Derek will talk a little bit more about that. We mentioned, cast, toasting, charring, again, very manual orientated, where the Coopers are watching that process. There's various different cooperages around the world that do it differently. Sometimes it's done by eye, sometimes it's done by, there's a lot more instrumentation in the process. And it's fascinating to see the differences you get with those barrels as well that we get into Midleton. As I mentioned earlier, they inspect every barrel, every bourbon barrel that's brought in is inspected. Every, sherry, wine cask that's brought in is inspected. We have probably over about, I'd say, 150 different types of casks. So massive amounts of innovation, massive amounts of variety and diversification with the range of casks that we use. And of course, the coopers have to be specialists in all of those. So this is really, really important, I suppose, in terms of the kind of the toasting levels and the charring levels. And again, I'm kind of a visual person, so I think this demonstrates things a little bit easier for people to understand. The toasting level really, for me, is where so much of that flavor is coming from. When we're ordering a barrel, we're looking at different specifications. It could be light, medium plus, heavy, typically when it comes to the toasting levels of the barrels. That range then of how the cooperage produces those barrels can give you different taste profiles that you will get from that barrel down the line. So like a light toast can give you maybe kind of more earthy, maybe kind of a greener type notes, tertiary type notes. As you're kind of going up the spectrum, you can kind of start getting more sweetness. Even though there's ways of creating spicy barrels, there's ways of creating smoky barrels. So within that range of toasting levels, and even with, like, say, a light toast, you can initially start off with a high temperature and drop it down to a low temperature and still get the same light toast. You can start off with a low temperature and increase to a high temperature at the end, still get a light toast, but that will give you different flavors coming from that. So the permutations of those toasting levels and the kind of specific recipes of toasting that the cooperage employ is really remarkable, the differences you can get in those barrels. We have some great trials going on with some of the barrel cooperage producers, and it's really, really fascinating getting to taste those barrels and how different they can be. It's mad. So and then the top picture there is a picture from Antonio Pies-Labata's cooperage, and you can see a number of barrels kind of on the right there in a pattern, and they're basically over a fire pot. So we're going to show you a video there in a minute, and you can see the guy who's kind of watching the flames go up there out of that barrel. He's tasked to ensure that toasting profile is carried out. So they're European barrels, so you're just looking at a toast, probably doing like a medium plus there for the likes of ourselves. And he'll move it from fire pot to fire pot, and each of those fire pots have different heat in them. And he's just putting in oak, trying to maintain the correct temperatures in those locations to ensure that we get the desired result of the tasting going through it. Then on the char side, so again, I mentioned earlier, I suppose, about the American barrels, and if you can see the levels of char, typically you look at 4 levels. So char 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 would be kind of like the heaviest char. We refer to it as kind of like an alligator char, because when you look at the char, it looks like an alligator skin. Again, those char levels would give you different taste profiles, but in underneath that, so on the bourbon barrel side, like in underneath that, you still have a toast level that you need to maybe get like a sweet barrel where you have more toffee, caramel type notes coming through. But then you might just have like a char 1 or a char 4. Again, that they can play tunes with that in terms of burn times to try and get different aromas as well off the barrel. So again, more kind of permutations that way. A lot of the bourbons will probably use char 4, but there's been a lot of experimentation over the last number of years. So you get the diversification of char levels coming through now. The bottom right-hand picture there is a picture of one of our barrels being one of our black barrels, which goes into our black barrel product. It's an ex-bourbon barrel that's recharred. We're looking to kind of dial up the sweetness, even kind of butterscotch notes from that barrel. And funnily enough, that's not an AI generated picture. Probably looks like it's AI generated, but it's a legit picture. I can attest to that. It's fascinating when you see it there live, and there's no better smell. It's like when you walk into the cooperages and you have toasting barrels and charred barrels. It's kind of like freshly baked bread. So if it comes straight off the fire and you can kind of smell it, it's like freshly baked bread. It's really gorgeous smell.
I'm saying it for years, Finbar. You guys got to somehow make that a candle and sell it in the gift shop. It's the best.
Yeah. We'll have to start bottling it. It's gorgeous. Okay, I think we could probably play a video there if you want to roll that, Joe. So this is Kelvin Cooperage, and this is one of our black barrels being processed and recharred for us. So you can see the barrel basically being recharred again, and then that's going to give us a different kind of tasting note coming through on the final spirit. So this is a video of Antonio Pies Lobato's Cooperage. These are big sherry butts that are being made. So they're 500 litres. The typical the bourbon barrels are typically 200 litres. And you can see the fire pots there. So basically what they do is they move them from fire pot to fire pot. And depending on the recipe, it can spin more times on those fire pots as it goes through. And the idea is that you get to a final toast level, whatever the specification is at the end of the process. So let's move on to the next slide then. And it's probably throwing over to Derek there now to do a coopering demonstration. Enjoy.
Yeah, seeing you well, guys.
We all good? Can you hear me?
Hey, Derek. Yes, sir. We're ready for you, bud. How we doing over there?
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I'd like to introduce you here to the Cooperage here in Milton. I am Derek Crone, and I'm one of 2 Coopers here in Irish Distillers. I'm just going to touch on, maybe repeat some of the stuff that Tommy and Finbar were talking about, but I said I'm 2 Coopers, and my job here is pretty easy. Just make sure the whiskey doesn't come out of the cask. Over 2 million casks. So week 1 would be to be examining a lot of these bourbon barrels that come in from America. We should be examining about 600 barrels a day, and any issues we have with them, we would put them onto a reject line, and then they will go down to the Cooperage for the session. Then I will go down to the Cooperage and I'd repair them. Here alongside me now, I have a 500 litre sherry bush, European oak, and I have a bourbon American barrel. I'm just going to show you the difference in the 2 staves. Here is the inside of an American barrel. This is about a level 4, and here's the inside of a sherry bush. This is known as toasting, and this is charring. And I hope you can see it in the camera that in about 3/4 of the way, the whiskey has penetrated into the stave to take out the flavouring from the oak. I'm just going to run you through some of my tools. A lot of these tools would have been handed down to me over the years. Pretty much when I started serving my time, I'm qualified now with about 2 years. I served my time to Master Cooper, Gerard Buckley, 5th generation Cooper. If you know anything about coopering, you would have heard Gerard's name mentioned. So I started working with Gerard just before the COVID pandemic, and I spent 2 years inside this Cooperage working one-on-one with Gerard. And then I travelled to Scotland for 12 weeks training, as I was registered with the Scottish Federation, Scottish Coopering Federation, because we don't have an Irish Federation, a Coopering Federation here at the moment. Going forward, it would be amazing to see if we got a Coopering Federation here in Ireland, but at the moment we don't. So I was registered with Scotland, the Scottish Coopering Federation. I did 12 weeks over in Alloa, working with different coopers and different styles of seeing their techniques and like that. And then I came back after a while, and then I travelled over to the Antonio Perez family, where I worked a lot with these 500 litre sherry butts, which was amazing. Because there I was able to see how we got to toast the inside of the cask, and how they got to make them. It was a lot hands-on. And then finally I got to travel to France for 3 weeks training in a cooperage that worked with, a lot with wine casks. So not a bad apprenticeship. I got to travel a lot, and I really enjoyed it. As I said there, we hand down a lot of the tools. So I'm just going to run through the basic tools that I use daily. So here I have my hammer and driver. The hammer is quite heavy. The driver is for driving down the hoops that are on the casks. You see, it's quite dangerous, but if you hold the driver right, you should be pretty safe. Some of these tools go back thousands of years, and here we would have what we call an axe. So what this is this is for carving. This is for carving my stave. It's not for chopping. It's only beveled at one side, and this is to get the shape of my stave. If I turn the handle of this axe, I would have my adze. And this would be also for just paring off any part of the cask that I would think would have any issue with. So if I got a call during my day and send out there was an issue with one of the casks down the warehouse, I more than likely would bring my hammer, my driver, and my adze. This is really handy. If I have a leak, I can pare off a bit of the stave and see where the problem is. If I can fix this, if I can hopefully fix the cask down in the warehouse, if not, I'd have to run it back to my cooperage and repair it. I'm expected to repair about 8 to 10 casks every day. So this is my adze. After my adze, we have what we call a Cooper's Crows. So what this does, this tool was made unique for coopering. So what this does, it will take the groove out of my stave, it will sit on it and will go around. It will take the groove out of my stave, and this is where my head will sit into the cask, and this will stop the cask from leaking. Finbar touched on a while ago, and he said that coopering, everything is done by eye. I previously trained as a carpenter, and obviously we had a number of different measuring devices. But in coopering, everything is done by eye, besides fitting the head to the top of the cask. So what we have here is a compass, and this compass is unique to Cork and certain parts of France. So what this does, this will give me the size of the head of the cask that I'm going to put into my cask. Sorry, the head. This is going to give me the size of the head that I'm going to put into the barrel. So what this does, this goes around the cask 6 times. And once I come back to the mark that I started off, that is the size of my cask. There is opposite threading on this, so I can slightly adjust it and open it again. As I said, this is unique to Cork and parts of France. Usually everywhere else, they'd use dividers. So going forward, I'm just going to show you how I repair a barrel here in Jameson. So when I'm examining these barrels, what I'm looking for pretty much is that there is no stains in the barrels. Perhaps a barrel or a cask might have taken a fall or not. So I'm pretty much looking in around here. This is probably the most problematic issue we have would be in around the bung stave. So I just pop out the header. That's the best part of my job. When I take the head out of the cask for the first time, the smell that comes out of the cask is absolutely amazing. It never gets old. So for example, if I have an issue with this bung stave, I would chalk it up. So I can pop out this stave, and as you see behind me, I have many other staves that would have been knocked previously from other casks. So there you can see how far the whiskey has penetrated into the stave. So what I would do, I would go over my bench, pick out a very similar stave, come back, go to the planer or the jointer and joint it. And here's where I would have to, by eye, see is this angle okay with where I'm putting it to. The bigger the stave, the smaller the angle. The smaller the stave, the bigger the angle. And yet this is all done by eye. And if I get it wrong, it will go over and it would leak. And it won't stop the leaking, and this will come back to me. So it's very important that I get it right, and I get it right the first time. So I just pop back in the stave. In I go. The only thing that can help me from this stave not leaking is what we call a reed or a rush. So what I would do, I can't use any silicone, any griffle or anything like that. So I would just put a reed or rush down this side and in along the top of the close. Back in with the stave. And as you can see here, I have my rivets. I can adjust these rivets to the way. So roughly, hand size up is one stave, or one hoop, and 4 fingers down is the second hoop. Rivet to the front.
Finbar, when Derek is talking to you, do you find that he's yelling at you from being in this room all day and all these loud noises?
He's generally yelling at me for different reasons, Joe. It's because I'm throwing so many different casts at him. But yeah, it's a lot of noise, to be fair. But he's well able to handle it.
Once again, it's very important I get my rivets facing to the front of the cask. And the reason we call this the face of the cask or the front of the cask is because our casks will go on pallets. And these pallets, this bung stave will be facing the operator filling the cask. So as I said, this is probably this is the stave with the bung hole and that may give us issues. So when they're finished, they will be able to see it from when they're finished, and we'll be able to repair it without emptying out the cask. My staves are all lined up on the outside barrel. Then we pop back in the head. The staves go around this, I'm trying to get the head tight into the staves. Usually now what I would do is I would take in the rivet on my hoop and I'd make it slightly bit smaller, and I would flag my cask with the reed or the rush to prevent any leaking. This is how I had my cask prepared. The only thing I have to do now is I have to mark my cask, because once it goes out and gets refilled, if there is any issue with it, it would come back to me. So I would mark my stave here on the bunk side with a little mark just here, a little X. And then if the cask leaks out in the warehouse, it comes back and it's my fault. So I have to make sure the cask is 100% before they put the whiskey back into it. Now, I'll just run you through a small bit more in the cooperage. So what we have here is a horse. So what we do is a horse, and this is what they use to grip the timber when you're making staves. This is a hollowed out knife where there's a small bit of a curve, and this is for taking the curve out of the inside of the stave. My bottom here, the stave can't move. See here, or maybe you can't, but there's a little bit of a curvature coming in the piece of wood I'm working on. What we don't want to see when we are looking at these staves, we don't want to see any defects, any knots, or make sure our grain is 100% straight. Just going to go through this photo. You can see it from, this is back in the Bow Street in 1908, where you can see all the coopers, and a lot of the tools that are here on the photo are here with us today. The horse, you have this old stone wheel where every Saturday the apprentice would come in, and what he would do for the day, sit here and turn this wheel, while all the coopers would on a Saturday would sharpen our tools and have them ready for a Monday morning. I'm going to run you through some of the casks I have here with me today. This is a quarter cask. This cask is only used in short transport. It wasn't used for maturing whiskey or not, just for transporting whiskey from A to B. Here we have the American bourbon barrel, which I was showing the demo to you the other ago. What we have here is a wine cask. We have an Irish chestnut cask. We have a 500 litre sherry bush. We have a port pipe, which is a very similar volume. And the reason this was made taller was to fit more onto barges for going up and down the river. What we have here is a ton cask. And what a ton cask is, if you could fit 20 of those ton casks onto your ship, what you would have was a 20-ton ship. And last but not least, we have a chestnut cask. So as you can see, we're working with a number of casks here in the Cooperage. So that's pretty much it for me today. If you have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask.
All right,
Any
folks.
questions come in, Joe?
Yeah. Here's a good question. I love this question. You guys get this one all the time. This is coming from, I believe, Sarah, if I'm pronouncing this username right. Does the direction of the grain make a big difference?
Yes, grain would have to be straight, run straight up, 100%. Because if you don't, what you might get is a split in your staves, and once the stave splits, you won't stop the whiskey coming out of it. So as you see there, the stave there is pretty good, but this cask, the grain mightn't have been running 100% straight, and it might have taken a fall, and it would have split.
Yeah. When you think of a piece of wood, Sarah, it's almost like a bunch of microscopic tubes when you really zoom in on like a microscope, if you would. So it's important to keep those straight when you're splitting these staves so you can prevent leakage and stuff. Let's see, I'm scrolling through here now. If we have any other questions that pertain to this segment, you guys feel free to throw some things in here while we have Derek to answer our questions. If you have any questions about cooperage, I'm giving them a second. Derek,
What's your favorite cask, Derek?
Sorry?
What's your favorite barrel to work on?
The sherry bush. I work with quite a lot of the American 200-litre barrels, but it's nice to work with the sherry bush. I like working kind of just most physical, and I don't get to work with them often because we don't get many issues with them. But if I would speak a favorite cask, it probably would be the sherry bush.
I like that you look for that physical aspect, being an Iron Man, you know.
Yeah,
I got another. I got another question for you, Derek, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
This is coming from, I believe this username is Eric. It says, are the barrels shipped overseas whole, or are they taken apart and shipped as staves? Love this question too.
Well, that's a good question. So as I touched on a while ago, I served my time to Gerard Buckley, and his morning would be, he'd come in here in the morning, and the first thing he'd have to do, he'd have to stand 5 casks. So they were shipped flat pack when he was serving his time over 50, just under 50 years ago. But now they're shipped in whole. So when they come into us, they're all shipped. We just have to give them a quick examination, and they're shipped in whole, yes. But that didn't stop during when I was serving my time. Every morning I used to have to come in, and I'd have to knock down a cask and stand it again, just so I could kind of learn the way Gerard Buckley learned. That's one good thing about Irish distillers. I've learned kind of both ways. I've learned it the modern way with all the machinery and stuff like that, and I also learned how to do it with the old school way, with the old tools and the old traditional ways.
Yeah. When do you decide, Derek, another question here from Jasmine, when do you decide that a barrel is beyond repair, and what happens to the pieces after that? We get this question a lot. I'm excited for your answer.
Beyond repair, if it has a lot of issues with it, if the head is damaged, if the top or the bottom of the cask is damaged, if there's a lot of staves damaged in the cask, we would just knock down the cask. Then the damaged staves, we would maybe dispose of them, and what we would do is the rest of the staves and the bottom of the cask, we put it to side, and then going forward, as I was repairing other barrels, I might start using them staves to help me repair the other casks. So for that, it's very rarely, like we'd always try to use up, like it's coopering is quite an expensive way. It's quite an expensive way to buy. So we try to minimize the waste. So unless the cask is really poorly, we'd try to work our magic on it.
Yeah. Another answer there is they become flower beds at Tommy's house. You cut them up and he plants herbs and stuff.
Absolutely.
It's a great
we do get a lot of them requests as well.
Yeah.
You can look at a cask as having all different components. So, there's a lot of different components that are in there. A lot of those components, even on a bad cask that may be deemed beyond repair, you're still going to have utilization of a lot of those components.
Yeah. And if it isn't damaged, you guys, these barrels, man, sometimes can live a really long time. If they get used once, of course, by bourbon, then they can get used 2 or 3 times by us, and then they can go on and live another life with perhaps rum or something. Sometimes these barrels can just keep getting all kinds of use out of them to impart flavors. I got a great question from Kelsey, my friend here in Chicago. Do barrels ever get retoasted as part of the repair process, Derek?
Unfortunately, not here in Jameson. It'd be too risky to light a fire here in case something goes wrong with the amount of spirit that we have on site. So what we do here is we just prepare them. So sometimes, they could go off site and get recharred or retoasted to see if we get another bit of life out of them. But not here.
It's done like that in other industries. We don't necessarily do it ourselves for Irish distillers, but absolutely, it's perceivable to regenerate those barrels again, and they can go for further use for more decades after that.
Yeah. I got a question here that I think I can answer, but I don't want you to think that I skipped you. KPB Mix-a-Lot, great username here. What type of sherry cask is used? With Jameson Black Barrel, we're looking at some Oloroso, and she asked you use PX2. And if you were to explore some of our other ranges like Redbreast, we have used cream sherry, we have used PX. Highly recommend you taste the Redbreast PX if you haven't. But Derek, I'll let you elaborate a little bit more. So, what type of sherry cask are used when it comes to Jameson specifically?
I'll pass that question on to Finbury because I quite didn't hear you correctly, and it'd be kind of more down his road that he was.
Yeah. So it's all Oloroso that would typically be used in Jameson. But like you said, Joe, expertly, we use various different types of sherry. And as you mentioned, PX is a fantastic sherry as well. Very, very sweet, and that contributes fantastic flavor. And there's a Redbreast there that utilizes PX barrels in there. And it's exceptional. Definitely worth a try.
I agree. I will give you one more question here, Derek, and I'll let you carry on with your day and let these boys get back to the class.
Sure. And
the question is, why is there no Irish Cooperage Association, and is it because Jared just hasn't made it yet?
If Jared had his way, there would be plenty of them, yes. It was something that he really was keen on getting to do. But unfortunately, the number of Coopers that have died off and they just haven't been replaced. So I think when I qualified back about 3 years ago, I was the 8th qualified Cooper in Ireland. So the numbers are quite back a bit. I think there's a few more actually on since then, but we just got to keep growing, and hopefully in the near future that we'll have a federation, a Cooper Federation here in Ireland. I would love to be part of it.
Yeah, that's incredible. Only 8? So you're a rare breed. There's only 8 of you guys that can do what you do.
Yeah, I said the numbers have grown since, but I was told when I qualified, we had a Scottish Cooper to come over, and we had a Cooper from up the country to come down and give me my trade exam, which consists of being in this Cooper chair for a day and running through many different tasks, knocking down a barrel, putting a barrel back together, repairing a sherry bush, working with my tools, sharpening my tools, safety. So there was a day examination of that, and once that was done, then I was qualified. But Yeah, we'd love to. We'd love to set up a federation here in Ireland, and maybe look, before I get to retire, that could be a possibility.
Yeah,
I think it's down to a numbers thing, but I think you have to be a special sort of crazy to want to be a Cooper, and Derek's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Derek, I sure appreciate you, and I haven't had the pleasure of hanging out with you when I have been over there in Ireland. So in May, when I am there, I'm looking forward to sharing a meal with you and seeing you. So I just want to say thank you again for your time doing this demonstration. I appreciate you.
Perfect. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the class.
Cheers,
Thanks, Derek.
Cheers,
Bye.
Derek.
I'm looking forward to when we have smell-o-vision finally, and when he cracks open that cask, we can go in there.
Hey, we have the VR. We have the new
Yeah.
Jameson VR experience. We got to add some of the smell-o-vision to it. That'll be 2027. Yeah.
I'm nearly there. 5 years. Give us 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. So yeah, jumping back into it then. So obviously we've covered the kind of in about an hour, the extremely long journey of getting to the cask stage has been condensed there into about an hour. So now we're going to explore a little bit more the variation in the concept of cask. I'm sure there's going to be loads of questions here. I will say as well that in tomorrow's class, we're going to go a bit deeper into kind of what happens in the cask and the maturation process. You know, we're really focusing on the wood and the cask types here, I suppose, in particular. But again, any questions, throw them in and we'll try to answer them for you. So if we think the concept of the cask, you know, it's essentially this wooden vessel that we're going to hold the liquid in, and, you know, why it's a legal requirement is we're going to obviously extract flavor, aroma, color, tannins, all these various different compounds. But what exactly will be extracted and what happens in the cask will very much depend on the cask type. And just kind of a few of the kind of key kind of, I suppose, variations. Wood type we've kind of touched on already, you know, predominantly oak when it comes to whiskey casks, but again, we will try essentially any wooden cask. Not everything will work, but we will essentially give anything a go. And again, huge amount of flavor variation there. Going to touch on that a little bit later. The cask size will have a big impact. Like I mentioned earlier on, you know, 700 liters is the biggest cask size we can use. So like the reason that exists as part of the law really relates to the fact that essentially the smaller the cask, the more surface area there is interacting with the liquid. And then conversely, the bigger the cask, you're going to get, as you get bigger, you're going to get kind of less and less surface area per liter of whiskey. So you're going to get slightly less wood interaction. So that maximum is there really to ensure that, you know, you don't have just a big 10,000 liter wooden vat and kind of call it a cask. You just wouldn't get enough interaction. You wouldn't get enough wood influence. So again, it's kind of coming back to minimum standards. What way you can get variation then, I suppose the last 2 points there, will the cask, actually if I go to the bottom one first as well, will the cask be virgin or refill? So essentially within the industry, a virgin cask is one that has never been used before. So we actually use a variety of these, with two kind of classic ones, virgin American oak, and we use a bit of virgin European oak. In recent years, we've been delighted to be able to use a bit of virgin Irish oak again. And the analogy I always come back to is, think of a cask just in a very crude form. Just think of it as like a tea bag. You know, it's made of organic matter. There's only, you know, a certain finite volume of flavor compounds and stuff inside that wood that can be extracted. So if you think of kind of like the tea bag effect, each time we use the cask, we're going to get slightly less wood influence. Now, I think you have to be very careful there not to think that in terms of quality. It's nothing to do with the quality of the whiskey. It's how much wood influence do we want. So with a virgin cask, never been used before, you're going to get a huge amount of cask influence. You know, let's say like lots of that, maybe like toasted wood character, lots of wood spice, which depending on the variety of oak, you know, maybe getting like clove from like eugenol, maybe like American oak, maybe getting kind of nutty tannic character, maybe from the European oak, wood spice like cinnamon, nutmeg. But like with a virgin cask, you're going to get a huge amount of that. What's nice about the Irish law is there's no restriction on cask usages. Again, it's basically a wooden cask. So we can and we do reuse or refill casks on site. We typically use them 3 times. Again, not a legal thing, just kind of comes down to what styles of whiskey do we produce. And again, each time you use the cask, you're going to get less, say, cask or wood influence coming through in the whiskey, but that doesn't mean it's lower quality whiskey. Like I think Finbar mentioned at the start, you're going to get a certain maybe percentage of wood character in the final whiskey. Well, that'll totally vary depending on its virgin or maybe a first or second or third fill. So basically, the less wood influence, then you're going to get more of the spirit character coming through. And like we talked about last week, that could be maybe a fruity pot still, a spicy pot still, an oily pot still, maybe a slightly sweeter grain whiskey. So the more refill casks you use, maybe a little bit more of that spirit character then will actually come through in the final whiskey. So that's important to bear in mind. And then just the third point on the screen there, has the cask been liquid seasoned? So if it's not a virgin cask, it's used somewhere before it comes to Middleton, and we'll talk about a few of the options there. The liquid that it's held before it came here is going to have a huge impact, as we're going to see. So whether it's held a higher strength spirit, maybe like a bourbon, something a little bit lower, like a fortified wine, maybe like a sherry or a port or something, something even lower than that. Let's say if we've used beer casks, stout, IPA, they're all going to have huge influences in the final product, particularly lower ABV beverages tend to give a huge amount of flavor, like a stout or an IPA, definitely those fortified wines and stuff. So you'll really get the influence of the seasonal and liquid coming through as well. So much variation there. But looking at the kind of main ones that we're using, touched on this already. American white oak is, I suppose, the wood type that will be most common within our warehouses. So American white oak, this is one of the subspecies. It's Quercus alba. So that's your kind of classic style of American white oak that you guys, possibly have grown in your back garden. You're lucky over there. You've quite a lot of it definitely compared to Ireland. Finbar kind of touched on this earlier on. It is a subspecies. As a result, it's quite unique and quite different to some other subspecies. Has quite a tight grain, particularly compared to definitely if you compare it to Irish oak. So the American oak is going to be tight grained, high lactones. So these are just I suppose one of the influences when it comes to flavor. Lactones, particularly a really nice kind of a coconut kind of flavor profile. Lower in the tannins on this side. So tannins gives you that kind of mouth drying kind of astringency on the palate. So they'll be much higher, as you'll see, for example, let's say like European oak. So as an oak, it is very distinctive. The tradition in the States, as Finbar touched on, kiln dried. So they're going to bring down the moisture content in a kiln environment. And as you'll see in a minute, particularly made into barrels, 200 litre cask. But the kind of flavor that we're typically going to get here, caramel and maple, so kind of sweet flavor profile, toasty, woody, or toasted wood, I suppose, kind of speaks for itself. That's sweet vanilla coconut character. So the coconut we touched on coming through in the lactones. The vanilla, that's a compound called vanillin or vanillin, which actually, again, is kind of naturally in the wood. So about 30% of American oak is what's called lignin. Particularly when that lignin gets heat treated, it essentially gets broken down through a few different stages, but eventually into that vanillin or vanillin, which is like natural vanilla aroma. And kind of a soft mouthfeel on the palate. Again, lower on the tannins, you're not going to get a huge amount of that tannic character. Like I said, the American white oak then is going to an American cooperage, for example, like Kelvin that we've seen in the video there. So when it's been kiln dried, it's going to be made into a 200 litre barrel. So that is the cask size we're talking about here. Charred on the inside. And again, the charring is going to have a very specific impact on the flavor profile. If you can imagine, you're caramelizing lots of the sugars, creating some of that sweet character we talked about in the last slide. So really, really important from a flavor point of view. It's not just to look different. There's a reason it's part of the law, I suppose, in the States. And again, it's part of the law because these have specifically been used in the bourbon industry to make bourbon whiskey. And again, like Finbar mentioned, they require a new or a virgin oak cask that has been charred on the inside every single time. They don't have a use for the casks. It's great news for us. We're more than happy to take them over here. And again, vanilla, coconut, caramel, toasted wood. Finbar touched on some of this already. You know, we're requiring huge volumes. Thankfully, you know, we've grown to such a volume or such a scale here in Middleton. You know, Jameson being such a huge international brand now, to make it, obviously, we require a lot of bourbon barrels, you know, well over 100,000 a year on any typical year. And as a result, you know, working with various cooperages, agents, distilleries to source casks to our specification. Grade 1, so the best quality, standardized char level, like Finbar talked about, the 3 or 4 char. And again, as much as possible, then we're controlling the flavor that we'll take back. So yeah, they're the main cask type that we take in, used right across the brands, and particularly important to Jameson Black Barrel. There's a few variants. We do use some of the virgin American oak casks in Black Barrel as well, getting a bit more of that wood character coming through there, maybe a little bit more of that wood spice, but again, lots of the sweetness coming through. The double charred barrels that Finbar mentioned, again, they will have been used in America. We get them charred again, or a second time, or a re-char, whatever way you want to think of it, before they come over here. So that's kind of unique because it is a cask that has been used once before, but again, because it's being re-charred, you're going to extract even more of that sweet character coming through. So a few kind of unique American oak influences in Black Barrel, for example. And then the second main source for staying is European white oak. This is kind of a little bit of a broader term because there's kind of 2 key subspecies that we classify under European white oak. We've got Quercus robur, which will be the main one that we're using on site, probably up to about 70% of the mix. And then there's Quercus petraea. Quercus petraea tends to grow quite well on volcanic soils, kind of a more of a shallower kind of a root pattern, if you want to think of it that way. So maybe a little bit of a lighter flavor profile. You can get some of those light kind of fruity characters coming through, whereas really what's on the screen there, some of that more high tannin, nutty flavor profile is probably more closely associated with the robur, to be fair. And again, that will be the main subspecies. More of a medium grain, so think of it as kind of a more open grain when we're talking about the European white oak. Essentially going to get a lot of liquid interaction with the wood as a result. And what we're going to be extracting then, high tannins. So again, with the European oak, high tannins, you're getting more of that astringent quality on the palate. Flavors coming through, you are going to get some of that vanilla character coming through. Almond, even sometimes kind of maybe like a hazelnut note. Walnuts there as well. Chocolate. Definitely spice, what we kind of call like wood spices, nutmeg, clove, maybe cinnamon. So a real depth of flavor with European oak, and definitely that kind of drier palate. So any of us are doing the kind of tasting next week with the more deconstructed parts of the Black Barrel. When we really isolate the European oak, you'll really be able to pick that up as a different quality, I suppose. And essentially, we're using most of the European oak in the season format. As I said, we do use some virgin in, say, for example, like the Jameson Distillers batch. But definitely, if we're talking about Jameson Black Barrel and most of the other brands, it's European oak in the form of the sherry butt. So again, the wood has been air dried typically in Europe, toasted on the inside, so slightly different heat treatment than, say, the American barrels. The butt is actually the size of that cask. It's 500 liters in capacity. They say that's actually the same scale of cask that the Romans used to hold their wines 2,000 years ago. The only difference is they would have held the staves together with willow hoops back then. Obviously, pre kind of steel being available. But other than that, scale-wise, you know, pretty similar to what the Romans used to hold the wine. I think that alone is just a really cool fact. So they're made in that cooperage in Spain, Antonio Paez Labato. They're going to be seasoned for about 2 years with sherry. I normally mention it here, but thanks to the good question earlier on, again, sherry, there's multiple different styles of sherry, you know, kind of maybe drier ones like a Fino maybe, or the sweeter ones up like PX or Pedro Jimenez. The majority of what we use, though, are Oloroso sherry. So slightly on the dry side, still quite fruity and nutty, though. So for 2 years, it'll hold the Oloroso sherry. Gets sent over here to Middleton, obviously. And when we fill this with our spirit, we're talking about pot still spirit going in here. Again, getting that lovely kind of natural nut character coming through from the wood, lots of lovely tannin. Of course, the type of sherry that it's been seasoned with will have an influence. With Oloroso sherry, you're typically kind of getting some of those extra dried fruit notes, raisins, sultanas, figs. They really complement the actual European oak character. So we kind of collectively term that kind of a Christmas cake influence. I know Christmas cake, that might not exactly translate to you guys in the States, but here in Ireland at Christmas time, we make kind of a fruit cake, essentially. Fruit, nut, maybe a little bit of whiskey. I think is a tradition. It just helps just to give that final perfection of the flavor. So yeah, we call that kind of a Christmas cake character. Synonymous with redbreast, I suppose, but really important to Jameson, and again gives a really nice foundation of flavor to say like a Jameson Black Barrel. And yeah, within the warehouse, like I suppose it's fair to say over 95% of the casks we have in our warehouses would be bourbon barrels, being by far the majority, or the sherry butts. And then Finbar is going to talk a little bit more about some of the other variety that we have.
Excellent. Cheers, Tommy. Actually, must say we're in a great spot here in the Academy building in Middleton Distillery. And I think afterwards, myself and Tommy are going to see if we can get a key for this gate here and have a drink for ourselves. So just going through the other cask types. I mentioned earlier, from a cask variety perspective, probably over about 150 different types of casks. And I suppose to kind of put shape on that, we see a cask as kind of like it's like a seasoning rack for a blender. Each component and each different cask type they use can give them something a little bit different in the recipe. Their job is to blend all that together to create, one of our finished products or something new. So the first three there, the Madeira Drum, Marsala Cask, and Malaga Butt, they're all part of our Spot series. So, just looking at the Oloroso cask, that would be synonymous with our green spot. The Madeira cask is our blue spot, which is 7 years old. The Marsala is our red spot. Malaga is our yellow spot. Red spot's 15 years old. Malaga is 12 years old. And, initially it's kind of matured in bourbon or sherry. And that would, our Oloroso sherry, that would be kind of our green spot, which isn't depicted here. The Madeira Drum then is, matures on the island of Madeira with a Madeira wine. And that would give us these kind of tropical notes into the Spot series, kind of like, pineapple, banana type notes. Marsala cask, again, kind of, deep fruit notes will come through on that. Things like kind of plum, apricot. And on the Malaga side, kind of figs, sultanas, those type of notes come through. And again, tropical notes. So they all give, our final spirit something different. If you haven't had the pleasure of trying some of those products out, do have a dabble. They're all 500-litre barrels. Some of those, as Derek was showing in the cooperage, they all come in vast shapes, sizes, different designs. That's the beauty of all these different casks that we have. Port Pipe makes fantastic whiskey. We use like a ruby port. We use tawny port as well. The ones in the 650 litres would be a ruby port. And deep kind of fleshy fruit notes will come from our Port Pipe. We use that in Redbreast. It's a single postil we have. I can't praise Redbreast enough. There's a lot of wine cask influence in Redbreast, specifically kind of the sherries and the port style of wine casks. Irish oak, I have a lot of love for Irish oak. As Tommy mentioned, we don't have an abundance of Irish oak, but it's coming back. But obviously it takes a long time to grow. We work with a forestry consultant, Paddy Purser. He helps us source Irish oak around the island of Ireland. We're fortunate enough to be able to, pick some of the best oak that's available. A lot of this oak comes from kind of old estates that would have been managed over the last couple of centuries. And we're getting the pinnacle of Irish oak that we use in a brand we call Middleton Very Rare Undar Gaelic. So Undar Gaelic is Irish for Irish oak. The story behind the Irish oak hogsheads is great with that brand. So what we actually do is, we source kind of the best of oak we can get from these old estates. We'll fell a number of trees, and these trees are probably 150 plus years old, and really, really well managed, long stems. We send those logs over to the north of Spain and Barrala to get quarter sawn. Unfortunately, we don't have any stave mills in Ireland that can do quarter sawing. So it's produced over in the north of Spain in stave mill called Galliquercus. They would quarter saw it for us. And those logs, each time they go over, each log is processed separately. The staves, the heading that is produced from that single log is kept separate. When it goes to the cooperage, we make the casks that are just using components from, say, tree 1. We'll make casks from tree 2. We make casks from tree 3. Might be 6 or 7 casks in each vintage, you could say. And what people love to do is compare and contrast the different trees. And although those trees might come within the same locality, some may be, north facing, some might be south facing, some might be growing on the side of a cliff or a mountain. And people can get different types of tasting notes, even though that oak is grown in the same locality. So it's a fascinating one. Obviously, from a production perspective, it's a nightmare. From bottling perspective, from cask manufacturing perspective, stave mill perspective, we don't have too many fans with that, but we love the product, and it's a fascinating one if you get a chance to try them, especially doing a collection. It's excellent. Wine casks. Derek had a Louisville Breton cask. It had kind of like a red bilge. When he was showing it in the cooperage. So we use these Bordeaux casks again in our spot. So it's a green spot, Chateau Louisville Breton. So Louisville Breton are well known for their Bordeaux wine. They make exceptional wines. What we do is we finish the green spot in these Louisville Breton casks. Hence you have green spot Chateau Louisville Breton. Again, excellent, lovely kind of blackcurrant, blackberry type notes that come through on that. Tommy mentioned as well about the beer casks. You may have come across a product we have, Jameson Caskmates. This is where there's beer put into a barrel for a period of time to mature. Take that beer out. We put Jameson in. So say, if there's stout that comes out, we put Jameson into the barrel. And really what you're looking to do is impart flavors of chocolate, coffee from the stout that was used to season the cask. Again, it's another product that we're really, really proud of. So you can see, I suppose, there's particular casks there that might have a kind of a signature taste descriptors that can be used to create one of our products. And again, then consistency with these barrels to ensure we're maintaining the quality on our final product. That each time you open a bottle, you're getting what you expect from that bottle. We tried to put. I was going to put the 150 different cask types there. Some of those are obviously top secret, and if I did, they wouldn't have allowed me to do any of these anymore. So, and probably wouldn't run into a couple of days. All night. Sweet chestnut. I have a lot of love for sweet chestnut. It's a fascinating wood and it works really well. Funnily enough, that the picture there isn't a Cooper grade tree. That's something that we're not going to yield any staves out of or heading out of, but it's beautiful nonetheless, and it has a place in nature. So sweet chestnut, typically the ones we use would be air dried. They're coming from the European side, Spain, France predominantly. It's a wide grain, it's open pores. Joe mentioned earlier on about, when you look at it under a microscope, it's basically all these channels. Because it's so open porous, and wide grained, you get a lot of liquid soaking into those staves. You get a lot of extractives into the spirit in a very short period of time. So chestnut gives up a lot of that wood flavor very, very quickly. And it's a fantastic flavor, sweet fudge, creme brulee. For me, it would usually be like banoffee pie, banana type notes, and maple syrup. My mouth is even
Make me hungry now.
Oh man, it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And originally we used this product in Method of Madness. It was a single pot still, finished in chestnut casks. Method of Madness is a very small brand. Not much availability around the world, but if you ever get a chance to try it, it's kind of our experimental and innovation brand, where we do a lot of experimentation, both from a kind of a distillate perspective and from a wood perspective. And one of the wood iterations we did was sweet chestnut. It was one of the first kind of different wood types. Tommy was going through them earlier on, and it's worked really well. And fantastically, I'm delighted to kind of say it's in Jameson triple now. So if you haven't tried that, it's definitely a must. Go and see if you can get a bottle of that, because it makes great whiskey. So this is just a couple more examples of the kind of wood innovations. So Method of Madness, Amberana. Amberana is a wood that came out of South America. It's really fascinating wood. This particular iteration was a single pot still. Originally, it matured in ex-bourbon barrels. We took that liquid out. We finished it in virgin Amberana cask for a period of time. And again, the kind of key descriptor that comes to me would be on the Amberana side would be kind of marzipan. Really, really lovely spirit. That one would be hard to get a hold of. But Amberana is a really fascinating wood. And again, all we're doing is, we're building a kind of repository of data of what these different wood types can give us. And, when you look at the future for Irish whiskey, the potential is enormous in terms of what we could potentially do. I mentioned Middleton Very Rare Dark Grey. Look, so that's one of the bottles there. I think it's the Kilranla edition. Again, fantastic whiskey, single pot still, originally aged in bourbon barrels, taken out and was put into the virgin oak, Irish oak cask for various different periods of time. And it's an excellent product, one to have a look out for. Talked about Jameson triple earlier on. You're looking at a blend between, pot still and grain whiskey. And there's a combination of kind of bourbon and sherry and chestnut cask that are in that product. And that's it was only newly launched probably about a year and a half ago, and it's going really well. Green Spot, Louisville Breton. So I talked about that earlier on with the wine cask that we get from Louisville Breton, seasoned with Bordeaux. So again, it's ex-bourbon barrel sherry, but married together. And then that's finished in Louisville Breton cask. That's an exceptional whiskey. Maybe I'm sounding like a record. I suppose it's like talking about my kids. Very proud of each and every one of them. They're all different in their own brilliant way. Jameson Remix Caribbean Beats. So this was a blended whiskey, and I suppose the last few iterations we're kind of looking at like fortified wine and wine barrels or virgin wood. This is kind of like more of a spirit seasoned cask, like Tommy was mentioned earlier on, where you have kind of a high strength rum cask. So we took ourselves to Barbados many years ago.
Had to be dragged there if I did you?
Well, it wasn't me unlucky at the time. I only came in for the last 13 years, but someone was very lucky anyway to head off to Barbados, any excuse, source some cask there, some rum cask, and we finished a kind of a blended, pot still grain whiskey in those casks. Resided in there for 18 years. Then what we said we'd do is kind of give it like another kind of double rum finish, and we got some casks out of Havana and finished it for another number of years, minimum of 3 years. I think there was a 21-year-old product age statement on that. Redbreast PX, we mentioned it earlier on, and as Tommy was talking about, there's various different sherries out there with the Fino and the Manzanillas and the Amontillados and the PXs, and PX is really an exceptional seasoning liquid to produce whiskey. Redbreast is one of the products we're really proud of. There's various different versions of Redbreast that utilize different casks, whether it's Oloroso, whether it's PX, whether it's port. And if you haven't had the pleasure, definitely try and go out and have a look for a bottle, because I think once you taste it, you won't look back. Done a Black Barrel here. I have a massive amount of love for Black Barrel. Tommy mentioned about the different cask types that go in there. It's one of our more complicated blends, you could say. There's like 14 different parcels. So when you think about it, we have a truck going to potentially 14 different locations, getting all the different casks that are required for that, which are, different cask types, different rotations of those casks, different distillate types. And then all that is married together to make the wonderful blend that we're very proud of with Jameson Black Barrel. Very proud of all of them. And I think that's kind of it.
Yeah. I was going to ask you a question a minute ago, but I didn't want to cut you off while you were going through those amazing SKUs. When it comes to chestnut or malleable, breathable grain, is there a fine line between just enough and too much? Do you find with those kinds of grains, like, is it very quick, like a couple months too much, and you're like, oh, there it goes? Yeah,
I mean, it can happen, I suppose. Some, and we have that kind of database of how casks perform over time. So there is certain wood types that you may have to time correctly. So depending on when a product may be released, because of that database, we'll be able to identify, okay, well, if we're going to release it, in a year's time or 6 months' time, there may be certain casks that might have to be filled so that it will tie in, so that it's kind of like the sweet spot, that when we take all those casks and together, we're maximizing the flavor profile that we're extracting from those barrels. So there is an element of science and timing that can go into it for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was amazing. I'm sure everyone in the chat will say so too. We actually have a pretty communicative bunch. These are the most questions I have seen in all of these that I had been a part of. So
cancel dinner, Tommy.
Yeah. Cancel your dinner. Go ahead and DoorDash now. We got 14 questions. We'll see how many of these overlap, or maybe we can answer 2 in 1.
Great.
I'm going to go all the way back to the first one that came at the top of the hour. This is coming from the Bodega Lounge. And this says, as you can see on your screen too, I believe, does the age times of usage for the wooden cask play effect into the flavor profile? I suppose you've answered some of that as the class has gone on, but I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And each cask type is going to give a different performance based on the specification. We'll give a different performance based on the liquid type. As Tom was mentioning, it can be a lighter style or heavier style or an oily style. So the distillate and how it interacts with that wood can be different. There's casks there that might give you a smoky note for a period of time, but then there's kind of a glycol compound that will dissipate and it'll transform into something different as those chemical and oxidative reactions are, and as the spirit is interacting with the wood, as those processes are taking place. So for sure, time can play a part. That doesn't necessarily mean that the longer a spirit is in the cask, that it's going to make it better. So you have to manage that as well.
Yeah. There's a common misunderstanding of people, these bourbon collectors, if you will, not to name drop anybody, but it seems like they chase age statements, and it's so untrue when it comes to quality spirits. But
yeah, and I suppose you'll see it in the blending modules, but they'll probably talk a lot about balance, and you want to try and balance those. So if you have a cask that's a strong wood contribution and it overpowers a distillate, and you're nosing it, all you're maybe getting is wood, we don't want that. You want to try and keep it in balance. So ideally what you want is you want to be able to go to a spirit, nose it, pick up a few notes, and you want to be able to kind of read the story of that, of the journey of that spirit. There might be an American oak contribution, a European oak, it might be a bit of a, initial bourbon or, a wine cask influence. Because each time you go back, you want to be able to unveil kind of different notes. If it's very wooded or very, distillate heavy, and you're just getting, kind of a monotone of kind of singularity in terms of what you're getting, that's not really the story we want to tell. We want to make sure that there's a balance there and that there's layers, and you want to be able to, that's the beauty about whiskey. You can go back to it, and each time you want to be able to know something different, and that's what we want to create.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty about Irish whiskey too, is all the nuance between the refills and the cuts and the distillation styles. There's just so much to look forward to in the Irish whiskey category.
A lot of flexibility.
A lot of flexibility. So I'm going to move on to this next, Saint Bernard. That is a cute dog as your profile picture. Does the 3 years have to be continuous, or could you age in one wood for a certain amount of time and then switch to another?
You can age in one wood for a certain amount of time and then switch to another. But in terms of total maturation time, it has to be 3 years minimum.
Yeah. Like if Derek messes up and it leaks and you got to put it in another one, that's totally okay. Yeah.
Totally okay, but it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen though. They really don't. It is crazy how you guys don't make mistakes. It is mind blowing, the operation you guys have going on. We're going to move down to Camille, I believe. Sorry if I pronounced your names wrong, you guys. I'm just reading your usernames. Do you have any plans for alternate wood sources as American white oak is becoming more scarce?
Funnily enough, American oak is actually the incremental value of a volume of American oak is still growing. Yeah. And I know I started a story about me being a tree hugger earlier on. I didn't actually finish why I was talking about being a tree hugger, but we've worked with forestry consultants around the world, and there's no forestry consultants that's telling us we should be cutting less trees. It's about doing it in a controlled manner and ensuring that there's regeneration at play. I suppose the other way of looking at it is, where an oak tree can be windblown. If that tree falls over, it's going to release its carbon to the atmosphere a lot quicker. And as you mentioned earlier on, Joe, about the lifespan of a barrel, it goes for multiple decades. I'd say pretty reservedly, probably 60 years plus in terms of how long it can be used. So when we're felling an oak tree and we are making a barrel, we're locking in the carbon, and that's not being released to the atmosphere. So from a kind of a environmental perspective, it is important to be active in forestry management. It is important to ensure that there's kind of an economical return for the landowner, and with that regeneration, you're allowing for better locking in of carbon, because those trees will fall over time. They will release the carbon to the atmosphere, and when they start decaying, and being able to make a bit of furniture or a whiskey barrel and locking in the carbon, that's good for the climate. And that's why we source 100% sustainable PFC casks, is because we know that our interaction with the land and any disturbance is going to be minimal, and we don't want to be doing any kind of damage to the environment.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not forcing trees to fall too young, or we're keeping those things in mind. Camille, I encourage you to look into University of Indiana. They have a really cool forestry project there with the conservation of the Ozarks. And Redbreast and Middleton actually did a collaboration with them with the American Redbreast series. There's a lot of really cool efforts going on out there. And while it seems like there's a lot of whiskey coming out all the time, and are we damaging our forest here in the United States? There's actually a lot of conservationists and rules behind it all. So while it seems like it's a lot, it's actually very, very well controlled. So hopefully we have a whiskey for years to come.
There is an organization called the White Oak Initiative as well, that are do a lot of work on behalf of the whiskey industry, and it's really about encouraging and educating landowners on how to manage the forest to ensure that white oak continues to generate, because obviously it's a main staple in terms of for wildlife. We're able to create food with an acorn production, so there's a lot of benefits from oak in general. And forestry owners need to understand the importance of having that diversification in their forest.
Yeah. We'll move on to the next one. This one comes from Jasmine. Since you are purchasing primarily ex-bourbon barrels, are you relying on the bourbon brands choosing the best oak? How can you tell the quality of the wood after the use? Great question.
Predominantly, I suppose, it's in the bourbon's interest to get the best quality oak. And, when the stave mills are procuring the logs from the loggers, they're looking for grade 1 Cooper and grade oak. You can't really have, an inferior log because it's not going to hold whiskey. So there's kind of a minimum criteria and a minimum, I suppose, quality standard that has to be maintained through the whole supply chain. And thankfully, I suppose, we benefit from the quality of what the bourbon distilleries use. And thankfully, they're so well made, they can go for multiple decades in terms of overall lifespan.
Thank you. This next one, you answered it a little bit with what we were just talking about. Are you concerned with the hiatus of some bourbon production?
I suppose the spirit industry is very cyclical. There is peaks and troughs. There can be bourbon companies that are making adjustments to their make for various different reasons, but there's still plenty of people out there that enjoy bourbon, and there's still plenty of bourbon barrels available for us to use. It's an industry that's gone for many decades. I don't see it stopping anytime soon. I think it's going to be there for many, many years to come. So I'm not too concerned. I mean, from Irish distillers' perspective, we've seen, we've gone through Prohibition, we've gone through world wars, we're still here. I don't have any fear for the future.
Yeah. I wonder if an Irish man influenced Franklin Roosevelt to do the virgin American oak so that Irish would never run out of used barrels. It is interesting. I wanted to ask you this too. This is my own question before I go on to the next question. We're a bunch of strapping young lads, so we don't know what happened in the 1930s and 40s. But when Franklin Roosevelt put into rule virgin American oak after Prohibition, before that, was a lot of Irish whiskey sherry only? Were you experimenting with American oak before the 1940s and 50s, or did that movement and that rule allow you guys to start playing with ex-bourbon?
I remember, Ger talking about it. It was kind of from the 60s onwards, we started using a lot more American oak. So in advance to that, I suppose, we were predominantly using a lot of European oak and wine barrels for sure. But obviously, yes, I mean, from the kind of 60s onwards, there was a bigger proportion of population of American oak coming in because, it makes fantastic whiskey, and it opened up those doors to us.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to think about for you guys. If you remember back to the history class, we've had spirits since the 15th century, and only in the last 60 years have we had, ex-bourbon barrels to play with. Like we're really in its infancy with what we can do with maturation. You guys really are at like the beginning of like the next generation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then when you expand it to future wood types as well,
Yeah. So this next one, I'll do a two-parter. These are back-to-back questions from Sarah. Is it possible to make a blended barrel with different types of wood in the one barrel? And also, how often do you get new casks?
It is. I'm just wondering, do we have any releases?
The Madness.
Yeah, the for sures, which were French oak staves and acacia heads. So it was a small release we did. It's definitely a fun way of playing around with the components that go into a barrel and how that can influence the spirit. I do have other casks there which I can't talk about, but it can be done. And what was the other part? It's possible.
How often do you get new casks?
New casks? Often, like every year. It's just the volume. The volume can change based on what we need for future years. But yeah, we buy new casks every year as well.
Yeah, and that's probably part of your forecasting, right? Just making sure there's always enough. I know it feels like we're in a lull now, but as you were saying, it's very cyclical. For all we know, there's a boom coming in. We got to be ready for it.
For sure.
So this is coming from Jasmine. For each time you reuse a cask, do you also re-char or re-toast it?
We don't in Irish distillers. It's done in other industries. So if in other industries they feel that the cask has given everything it was capable of giving, what they can do then is send that to a cooperage. They'll take off the heads and they'll re-scrape out the cask, and then they'll re-char it. What you're basically doing is, as Derek was showing earlier on, there's a tide line of how far the whiskey gets into the barrel. So there's compounds that are leaching out of that barrel. When you're regenerating it, you're scraping the inside surface, so you're getting more penetration into the stave. Probably about 4 or 5 mil of penetration, and then you're regenerating again. So you are getting additional wood compounds as you're going in deeper into that cask. There is additional compounds coming out. You're not going to get back to when it was like a first fill cask, or a cask after seasoning, but you will get a more wood contribution again after regeneration. And again, those casks can go for decades afterwards as well, which is great.
Yeah. Wait till you guys learn about blending and how you take all these different flavors and make it taste correct in a bottle. This next question is a sensitive subject because it was a cult favorite here in the States, and it's not available anymore. It's been discontinued in the United States, but it's still available over there and in other parts of the world. But can you talk a bit about the cask mates and where you source the casks for the stout and IPA? I really love those ones. Amazing.
So for the cask mates, say for the beer, so the beer we source locally here in Cork. There's 8 Degrees is a brewery here. They do the stout and the IPA for both those editions. We mature those barrels of beer in our own warehouses for various reasons. Again, we can kind of control the quality. Because it's a lower strength beverage, we need to be watch it very closely to sure we get maximum flavor out of those barrels afterwards. So the casks that are used are from the distillery, but the beer is sourced locally here in Cork.
Yeah, I really love those ones.
Mm-hmm.
I have another question for you. I was going to answer it in the comments, but I can't remember. Maybe we've done this in Method and Madness where we play around with all the fun species of wood. Have we used ex-Armagnac before or ex-Cognac? Have we ever played with ex-grape distillate barrels?
I can neither confirm nor deny
Okay.
if we used Armagnac casks, but it's a nice thought.
It's a nice thought. Heard that. Keep your eye open for down the road. Again from Jasmine, since chestnut is so porous and gives up its flavor easily, does it only get used 1 or 2 times? We touched on this a little bit, but we didn't answer the usage. For
us, we're still exploring. We've used chestnut twice, but we're also seeing how that performs in longer years. But it's something that we only started using in 2015, really. So it takes a number of years to go through rotations.
Yeah. Again, we're in its infancy. Only 60 years of playing with all these different species of oak. It's going to be really cool to see how it all comes to life. This is a question regarding Amburana, which, again, Method and Madness. How long has Middleton had Amburana barrels? I know there's a lot on the market after the Bolsonaro limited restrictions with the Amazon deforestation. I'm sure you're up to speed on the deforestation of Amazon, Finbar. But yeah,
I suppose on the sustainability, so we buy, it was a small volume of Amburana that we bought. We ensured that we got copies of the felling licenses and vetted all that to ensure that it was done in an ethical way. Obviously, with Balsarno and Amazon deforestation, we didn't want to be linked in any way to any deforestation. So we want to be sure that we're supporting the industry where it should be supported, where people are doing the right thing. For the release, it was a small volume of barrels. It was in our Method of Madness range, so that range is really small. So we're only talking, tens of barrels as opposed to hundreds and thousands of barrels. So just to give the kind of context of it, but we will always do our kind of ethical due diligence to ensure that we're not supporting anything that shouldn't be supported.
Gotcha. There's one more question here. I guess I can kind of answer this one here, but this coming from TL Ebron. Are there any planned tastings of Method and Madness spirits in California anytime soon? That's a multi-part question there, but when it comes to the supplier and it comes to the distributor and objectives and when and where these tastings are getting done, I am not sure about that. But I think there's only a few SKUs of Method and Madness of that large range even available in the state.
I would say probably 3 SKUs. I would say over there. Chestnut would be one of them if you can get your hand on that. It's definitely worth trying. There's a limousine oak as well, which is a wide-grained French oak. That's a malt, and single grain as well. The third one, yeah. I would say over there.
If you're stuck, guys, we'll fly over and help out if needs be.
I got 3 on my shelf, so I'm guessing that's the only 3 that are available here, or I have more.
You want to be careful.
I'd be like, where's mine? That's all from them. I just have 2 questions. I'd love to close this out with something a little bit off topic. But for you guys, when you get off work, you had a long day like you're about to now. Sorry for postponing your dinner with your family. What is your question for both of you? What is your go-to spirit of the line of Jameson, Redbreast, Middleton, Spots? What do you like to pour when you get home and you're taking a break?
Joe, that's like asking who's our favorite kid.
You know, it stays right here in the group. Yeah.
Yeah, we might have one, but we would never say it.
Not like this is being broadcast over the internet.
No one watches YouTube, guys. No one even watches YouTube.
Yeah, I'm messing, but I think Black Barrel is a fantastic whiskey. Redbreast is fantastic. Distiller's Batch is fantastic. There's 5 oaks in that. Relatively new product as well. If you haven't tried that, try that. They're all kind of discernibly different, and they all have their different skill sets.
I can tell you mine is definitely Redbreast 27.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Thinking of my Christmas present, Joe. Redbreast 27.
Yeah. Give me your address. I'll make sure we keep it there at your house.
Yeah. But the Method and Madness is a fantastic. Middleton, very rare, exceptional. They're all good in their own different ways.
Yeah, I'm fortunate to drink Friday Tranche quite often in my role, and it's
very expensive taste.
One of my favorite things to taste. I'm happy every time we get to activate around it.
That was 5-year air dried Tranche oak, extra fine grained Tranche. And the forest of Tranche is kind of like a mythical forest in France. It's kind of the pinnacle of French oak, and it's expertly managed over the last number of centuries. I remember going over and doing a visit there and seeing a kind of doctrine signed by Napoleon on how they were planting their oak. So basically, it was involved in those hornbeam trees I was talking about to try and maximize the straight length of those oak before they crown. And I just love the thought process that, he was signing something, a plan of how to plant oak, and he was thinking about shipbuilding in 100 years' time. Probably figured that he was going to live, to see them come to fruition, I suppose. But I think it's just fantastic having that long-term vision. So it's an exceptional one as well.
Yeah, so much lore with that forest and excellent cognacs. I guess my last question, and we'll let you guys go, and I'm sure these guys got to go to work too. I just wanted to ask you, what are you both excited about? Without giving us something you're not allowed to give us, is there anything you're particularly excited about? Maybe it's an innovation, maybe it's technology, maybe it's a spirit that's coming down the road. What do you guys got for me?
I think for me on the Irish whiskey side, I just think the category is fantastic. I think we kind of touched on it earlier on, with the different wood types, and there's so many permutations of, and we're just kind of at the start of that journey. There's so much potential in the category, so many new options that we can explore going forward, and I think it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to pinpoint to one, but yeah, I think, again, I suppose we can't name, but like, I just love any of these new wood expressions, because again, more than likely will have never tried whiskey with that kind of flavor profile before. Fair enough, I might not love them all, but I think that's really exciting. And again, can't name anything at the minute, but like, watch this space. Yeah,
Generally world first as well, so it's always it's great.
Watch this space so much in the last year with all these cool things coming, but there's a lot for me personally, and for you guys that are still tuned in and didn't have to leave to go to work. I'm very excited for what's happening in the States. We have Jameson Crested on the way. We have Jameson Distillers Batch on the way. We have the Jameson Bartenders Balls in full effect, and we even have this new Jameson VR experience coming to different cities. So there really is a lot happening in the Irish whiskey space for Pernod Ricard over here. Excited to get to all your cities and show you what I'm talking about. But I guess that's it. Finbar and Tommy, appreciate you. I'll see you in May. I can't wait. Guys, we'll get a bite.
Look forward to seeing you, Joe.
Always a pleasure to see you. So thank you, Finbar. Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Derek. Of course,
guys.
Cheers. Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Bye.
Thank you, Jameson Black Barrel too, and Lush Life Productions. And like I said at the top of the hour, if you enjoyed this class, please hit the like or the love button. Show some love in the comments like you always do. If you want to see more content like this from Portland Cocktail Week and classes like this, just follow them on Facebook, facebook.com PDXCW, or on YouTube at youtube.com PDXCW. We're also at PDXCW Lush Life Productions on Instagram. You can find me at Make Dram Sure on Instagram. You can see what I'm up to, what I mean by bartenders balls and VR experiences. You can also find more about Jameson just in general at Jameson US. And for you certificate students, don't forget that your quizzes are due today, guys. Come on, study, turn those papers in.
No pressure.
I do want to say, LA, for those of you that are close to LA, there's a bartender's ball next week. You can find out the info on Jameson Instagram and on my Instagram. We're doing that on Monday. I won't be at that one, unfortunately. I am busy, but I will be at the next one. We will be in Denver. There's a Denver Bartenders Ball. I saw some Denver comments in there. Again, you can find the link in the RSVP that on Jameson or on my Instagram. Looking forward to seeing you guys. And for anyone in Chicago, I have a VR experience coming in February. I'd love to see your faces there so you can get these goggles on and walk through the distillery virtually. It's pretty cool. But anyways, that is it for our time. I'm so excited I got to step in and do this with you guys. You're going to be back next week, and you're going to be with Kelly, and you're going to be with
Brona.
Brona, and who else is there next week?
Just me again, Joe.
Oh,
me and Brona.
You don't have
good hands.
Cliff notes. No, I'm just kidding. We'll see you guys next Tuesday. We're going to discover the secrets of blending Jameson Black Barrel. But thanks for tuning in. I can't
Bye, guys.
Out there and market. Be well and stay curious.
Cheers.
Bye.